Today we have Don MacGregor with us. Don is a man who I worked for years ago in heavy oil, and the time we spent together taught me a lot about how to approach safety in a people first kind of mindset. It's really funny to talk to him all these years later and realize exactly how much thought he put into this process, and to hear some stories that I hadn't heard before about when it was important to put people first and what happened when he did. Don MacGregor, thank you so much for joining me. I really am excited about this podcast.
And thanks a lot for coming to me with this, Dan. I'm excited as well. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my favorite thing about doing this project so far is really just reconnecting with people, and I'll say it right at the beginning that when I worked for you and with you years ago with Shell, I always I always had a soft spot for you. I always liked you. You were always good to me. That was never an issue, but it was neat to reconnect now, as you know, after a number of years, and really realize that we've got a lot more in common now than we did, back then even. And it's just amazing to have kind of reacquainted and become friends again. So I really appreciate you being on, and I look forward to hearing your answers to some of these questions.
Likewise. Thanks again.
Okay, so can you tell me a little bit about how you got into safety initially? So, I mean, your experience in the field, obviously, you've got a lot of experience in the field and a lot of experience at the executive level. What first drove you into safety, and how did you become so passionate?
Well, that's an interesting little bit of a story because there was nothing that drove me into safety other than that work was slow. Pipeline was very, very quiet and stuff, and I took that opportunity to update some of my tickets, your H2S and confined space and my ground disturbance. And when I was intaking those courses, they asked people if they would give any consideration to doing some safety work. They needed people for a turnaround. And I've never been out of work really in my life, so I wanted to keep working, and that seemed like an opportunity. Interestingly enough, when they asked us to sign the documents and stuff, and I looked at the information and what they were paying and everything, I elected to say no. And
Really?
yeah, so when I said no, they came back to me and said, well, we would really like you to be part of this. Would you consider being a supervisor for the turnaround? And this is what we would pay you if you would supervise. So I accepted that and did that little piece of safety for a bit, and then I went back into my regular line of work, which was of course pipelining and serving as a foreman and a number two different jobs. But it had woken something up in me that we needed to do much better than we did in terms of our safety culture and stuff with the company that I was working with at that time. I won't go into some of the things that alerted me to that because they were pretty ridiculous in all honesty. But so I decided to pursue safety with a little bit more interest and a little bit more passion. And then, of course, that tied into a lot of my personal beliefs in terms of loving and caring for people and making them the priority and seeing them benefit to the best of their ability and stuff. I was back at one time in my career, I was known as the nicest, kindest guy that fired more people than anybody else, right? And and it was just because I had expectations of myself, I had expectations of the people, and if they delivered, I was good. If they failed to deliver, and usually that was in terms of caring for one another. It wasn't so much productivity in terms of work, but it was as soon as you evidenced that you had no care or concern for your coworkers or representing the company well, then that was an offense to me. So it kind of played into my personality in that sense of the word. With that said, I've never been a proponent of not educating people to do well at their jobs and work safely. I've always had a low tolerance for zero tolerance, and I like us to set people up for success, see them do their job well, and be safe without any fear of retribution and stuff as we work to make them a better person. So, and that plays into how I think I work to become a better person too. So that was safety for me. It was I never cut anything off. right? Like to get into it.
Did you feel like you had that kind of need to take care of people before you got into this kind of role, or was that something at the same level, or maybe you didn't? Did you have the opportunity to do that as a foreman, as a lead? You would obviously be able to manage works or do some of that, but what you obviously you're very inspired, right?
Yeah, but I don't think it was always there because for one thing, I remember as a young fella on the pipeline, first job I did was with Flint, and we took all kinds of risks and gave no consideration to walking down straight-sided trenches that were 8, 9 feet deep to throw rocks out and things like it wasn't there to do that as a young person, but you start to get a little bit older and you start to value life, then that changes your perspective and stuff. So I think I grew into that with some maturity, with some close calls, not necessarily my close calls, but the close calls of other people. And I just thought that we really pushed the limits, and our behavior and our conduct was so questionable. Like I I guess one simple example I would give of that is at one point in time being on a job and being uh, needing someone to drive a crew truck, only to find out that 13 of 13 people on your crew, 12 had an impaired suspension, and one carried a learner's license that had been expired for 8 or 9 years, right? So you didn't actually have the common sense, the wherewithal, or the maturity to just function the way quote unquote normal society would have functioned and stuff. And I mean, there's some alarms that go off with that when you see how cavalier uh, things can be in a certain industry or a certain part of our society, right? So there was
Certainly.
lots of room for or lots of opportunity for improvement.
And then as you grew in that role, obviously, because so my memory of working together, I told you this when we were talking about this podcast, was you had a very, very practical approach to understanding how things should operate. And so it was, and there was always a learning because you were by far my foreman. I mean, you were very high up the chain when I was just starting out, certainly. But you were always trying to teach, and you did have that boots on the ground mentality. As a matter of fact, that even that phrase "boots on the ground," I think at least came through you, if not from you, about getting management on the ground. Get out of your truck and go talk to people. Teach them that you care. Teach them that you care enough to take the time to spend with them. I mean, that's all. Don, this is all the stuff that I preach in my keynote. I love saying preach, I guess, but maybe I shouldn't say preach. But this is all the same kind of stuff that I talk about in my keynote, and it came a lot from those conversations. What inspired that? What inspired that love? It's not normal. And let me just go a little bit further. It's not something that you have a lot of people that care about people. I would say certainly, but to have that on your sleeve and say, no, we have to treat each other better for the sake of treating each other better because we care about each other. That's not usually a conversation that I think pipeliners had when you first started. Certainly, it's probably a lot better now. I guarantee it is a lot better now. What inspired that?
Well, plain and simply for me, I come from a Christian background, and so I think that I tried to emulate some Christ-like values as I see Christ through Scripture and stuff demonstrate that it's about loving people. So uh, it was about you had to feed, you had to heal, you had to care, you had to love, and then you could teach, right? And I didn't see a lot of that in my experience in the oil and gas industry. I remember my first night on the rigs. It was certainly not a loving atmosphere to enter into or anything. And I mean, and I'm not talking about ooey gooey feel good kind of stuff. I'm talking about the very practical needs that people have. And I loved my dad dearly. He was an incredible man. He was a veteran, and but he had a deep and passionate love for God. By the time I came into the world, he had served in the Korean War, had suffered some consequences of that, and he was not a teacher. right? Like we got told how to do something about once, and then it got pretty owly when it was time to perform, and you came up short of the mark. Um, so that also influenced me that people needed to be encouraged and stuff. And then the other part of that was having a learner's mindset too. So it's not just the loving, caring, healing, teaching people, uh, but it's the listening and learning from people. So the practicality of the boots on the ground stuff also came with looking at somebody that had done a job for 15 or 20 years, and maybe they had a few bad habits, but you had to take the time out to understand why they did what they did the way they did, right? And so that created a dialogue which created respect. And then of course again that just taking an approach, and you know what, it's important to always ask questions from my perspective, but not dumb questions, right? So, and what I would say is people always say there's no such thing as a dumb question. But I remember we'd come up with these cards, right? And they'd give them to the safety people uh, who it had started to get to a place where a lot of safety people had no experience in the field. They had a degree, they had a certificate, something, but they really didn't have experience in the field with people. So they would come up with this card, and you know it would be like ask questions. So the first question you'd ask is, "What are you doing?" And one example, I remember being in the field with a safety person, and we walked up to three guys that were digging a hole. And so they had their little card, and they looked at these three people, and they say, "What are you doing?" And you know, credibility and everything just goes boom out the window, right? And yeah, so you know, a dialogue just on even if you started with the weather and man, guys, you're slugging it hard uh, for this kind of weather and stuff. What kind of, are you taking some breaks and spelling each other off, or any just a dialogue, right? As opposed to some robotic question process. So I don't want to get off track on that, but seeing the need for that and knowing that I had some fundamental teachings in my life, to also tell you that I did leave the pipeline construction and go back to college. And I actually went to seminary to and got a pastoral degree, right?
I
Uh,
didn't know that.
yeah,
You know
yeah,
what?
not that many people know that and stuff. So I had a degree in religious education, a bachelor of religious education, and when I was done, uh, you know, I think I can honestly say I'm not a religious person. I have a deep-seated faith, and
At my church, they say it's not a religion; it's a relationship, and
it
I really find that that leads me in the right direction most times.
yeah, and that is true. It's the relationship, and so if I just go to the very core of that, I know that you know the Ten Commandments, right? There were 10 rules that were created for people, right? Not to rule people, not to control people, but to actually enhance quality of life. Just basic fundamental things, which are respecting your fellow man. You don't steal from your fellow man. You don't covet what he owns. You know, you you don't want to cheat on him with that person's wife or something. Those are fundamentals to society to build a stronger and better society and stuff. And for me, they played naturally in to how I saw safety. Again, it was I wanted the rules to be for the people. Again, I don't want to go off track, but you know, we create rules not really so much with the worker in mind. And the other thing is that once we've installed a rule, we're very, very reluctant to ever remove that rule because we like rules. So more
Yes.
rules, more rules, more rules. But are they truly beneficial to the worker, and are they actually keeping the worker safe? That's a really good topic of discussion. And
Can you
and
give me an example of a rule that you find to be not helpful to the workers? Like, just if you went to the realm of, because I know you've seen some things, Don, and I don't want you to name any names because we don't name names here.
no, no,
But can you give me an example of? I've got one in my mind, but I bet you you've got a great one. What rule
Well,
do you remember you hate?
there are a lot of rules that I think are kind of funny. But one of the oldest and dearest rules to all these people, and I always remember the safety guy that made the people shave with a lady's bic with no shaving cream because they came to site unshaven, right? And that was like I'm a good safety person because I demeaned and humiliated this person or whatever when they were accessing sites. So sorry to safety people that have done that, but actually no, I'm not.
No,
But the clean shaven rule is a classic example of a rule that comes into play and stays, right? And so we at a time and place when we all would take H2S, and especially on the rigs and stuff, we were all effectively rescue personnel, right? But so you had to be able to mask up, you had to get your equipment, get on, get in, and get it done. Okay, so but then we implemented rules, more rules, and for reasons like, and probably good reasons, right? But you had to be fit tested. So now you couldn't just put on a pack. It had to be the pack that was fit tested for you. And then that expanded out to everything that we did. If we were doing sour service work, you became a highly specialized crew that was doing bolt up and breaking integrity on systems and stuff like that. Very specific crews, right? That was the purpose that they served. Rescue became exclusive to a rescue team. It was no longer any member could be a participant in that. You were supposed to radio for help, call for help. The rescue team would come in, they'd put on the equipment, they'd go in and rescue that individual because historically too many would-be rescuers also became victims.
right.
But at the end of the day, we had advanced to a place point in time where maybe 3 or 4% of the entire crew on any given facility actually had reason to be clean shaven because none of them were ever going to put a mask on and stuff like that. And the ideology that, oh, well, just if you had to be rescued, that mask had to fit right. Well, they were not going to have a fit tested mask for the person they were rescuing. You're going to get an O2 mask slapped on or something like that. They were going to get you out of harm's way immediately. And it would be like saying that everybody in the world should be clean shaven because if you're in a car accident or something, they might have to administer O2.
With a
So
mask that doesn't quite fit you.
yeah, with a mask that doesn't quite fit you, right? And the I get quite sarcastic about it because when I get my burr up, it's kind of like, well, should everybody shave their chest because now we have AEDs, right? And you want to be able to stick those AEDs on in order to defibrillate a person. That's important. But at day's end, that's a rule that we just will not let go, and it's still policed, right? Uh, and that's all it is policed. And so, for no good apparent reason, you have to be clean shaven in my personal opinion. And what else is going on with the people, amongst the people, and what they're doing and stuff that's far, far more important
Yeah.
than addressing whether in fact a person's clean shaven that can no longer mask up, that hasn't been fit tested for any PPE. They're not a painter, they're not wearing a half mask or a full mask or anything else, right? It's really honestly meaningless, but it's something that we just don't give up. So that's a long-winded answer to one of the things that I just think are, wow, seriously, like it's like a tax. Once it's there's no way it's leaving, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting too because today is different than it was even 15 years ago. You think about the things that could be going on in that worker's life, the mental health issues that people are having now because of what happened over the last 5 years. Just the different, could be addictions, could be anything going on that we could be actually talking to them about and maybe figuring out for them. But yeah, are you clean shaven? That's an interesting one. When they did that to me, because you were there when they did that to me, I was really bummed out because I had this gorgeous goatee just sit right here on my chin. And I thought, I was probably, I was not young either. I was like 38 or 39, right? And I was walking around. I had to shave my goatee. And I saw a picture of myself in that goatee about a couple days ago, and I thought, why would I ever think that that thing was worth keeping? Like, I should have shaved that thing anyway. So Shell gave me that. That happened with me. That certainly happened. Um, so, can you tell me a success story that you had in terms of your coaching of safety that happened throughout your career that you feel like is something that you were happy that you were there for, a feather in your hat, for you? And obviously, I know you're not a proud man, Don, but
Well, I think the very first one that comes to my mind, that's pretty near and dear to me, is I was doing a project on what was a turbo boiler. It was actually the largest at that time ever built, I believe, in the world, but it certainly was in Canada. And it was a circumstance where we had zero tolerance for 100% tie off. In other words, if you were not tied off, you were terminated.
right,
And it was an incredibly complex job because all the tubing and everything in the boiler and stuff, it was from top down, right? So everything was hung. So nothing was constructed from the bottom up. It just was progressively hanging, all this tubing and stuff in the core of this boiler. A lot of lifts, a lot of activity, a lot of scaffolds being built and stuff. And on one particular day, I stopped and I had a conversation with a scaffolder who wasn't tied off. And so it was incumbent really upon me, I guess, to take his job away. But my problem with that philosophy is I have never believed that we should send somebody somewhere else to die, right? I think we need to do that. We need to show them that we love them, we care about them, and that what we're asking them to do is in their best interest, and encourage them in that way, not just say, you know what, you didn't do what you're told, so you're fired, right? And so in that particular instance, we had a really good dialogue. He had a wife, he had 2 kids, I believe, if memory serves me correctly. And I said to him, it wouldn't benefit me at all to take his job from him. It wouldn't be beneficial to his wife. It wouldn't be beneficial to his children. And I had no interest in sending him down to another project to continue on with the same behavior and lose his life. So I asked him if he would make a commitment to me, not because I was such a good guy, but simply because he loved and cared for his wife and kids, that he'd make a commitment to me to be tied off. And he made that commitment with me, and we shook hands. And that was kind of cool, I think it was 2 days later, I was at 75-meter elevation. So, 75 meters, we're up there a little bit. And I heard a call for man down. And of course, my heart sinks because I've seen, a few fatalities in my lifetime and in my career and stuff. And I was sick. And then they said it was which pillar it was, and it was at the 75-meter elevation. So I ran around the corner, and just maybe 5 feet out from the rail is this guy, and he's hanging there in his harness, and he's looking at me, and he said, "Thanks, man." And all that,
wow,
and so the whole rescue was about leaning out and him and I joining hands and getting them. And it was just one board had tipped up, and he had slipped, and it didn't deploy anything. We took all this stuff out of service after because it had been used, like but it didn't deploy the lanyard or anything, right? It just kind of caught him. And we I can't remember if he cried. I know I had tears in my eyes, and I hugged him when he came over the rail to me, and we unhooked and did the report up and the stuff on it, and I guess that was one of those ones. Maybe there should have been, quote unquote, the golden hard hat or something.
yeah,
But
yeah,
he took the opportunity to share with the crews at that time and stuff, and it was so that would be. There've been quite a few, but that one was really, really meaningful to me because he was alive, on my job because we just had a good dialogue and we made a commitment to each other, right? And we evidenced that we cared about each other's.
That's what safety should be. And I just can't help but thinking what did he do after, and who did he tell that story to, and how many people? I mean, obviously you can share that as a safety guy, but as the guy putting on the harness, how many people did he tell that story to that I'd be dead?
Yeah.
Like that's a domino effect that you have no idea how many people you touched. Not to
No,
mention your family, right?
yeah, it's very true, right? Like it's you just and the other thing is that that was my job,
Yeah.
right? So I hadn't done anything other than what I perceived my job to be. But I'm proud of it because it was a point and place in my life where I'd completely moved away from any ideology of policing people or even using the terminology officer. I'm not interested in being an officer. I'm interested in being a resource, a coach. We constantly preach, and for the most part, the companies believe wholeheartedly when they say that people are our most valuable resource. Because they can't get it. You can't get anything done without them, Dan. Like, we need people. AI might change that at this time, but right now we still desperately need people healthy and willing to work for us and stuff. But while the companies, I believe, at the core believe it, that gets lost in translation by the attitudes and ideologies of people, right? And not to be critical, but a lot of times that comes out of our sense of self-importance rather than recognizing the importance of others.
Right.
But there is nobody, and again, we don't name names, but I remember specifically a Shell superintendent, and a laborer came in one day and was quite upset because the toilets were plugged and they were overflowing, right? And he said what he had to say and everything like that. And this superintendent listened to what he had to say and said, okay, we'll get right on it because you shouldn't have to put up with that. I thought, oh, cool. Because the attitude of this person sucked, for lack of better terminology.
Yeah.
And that superintendent, he gets up and he goes out, and I thought, well, what's he doing, right? Like, and I kind of knew where the guy that took care of the toilets and stuff was. So, and I look out the door, and he's going into the wash car, and he doesn't come out of the wash car like I was expecting him to make an observation and come out and stuff. And so I walk into the wash car, and here he is with the plunger and stuff and a mop and bucket that was in the wash car. He had it ready. So I went into the building beside. I got the mop and bucket from it too, and went back into the wash car with the superintendent, and we cleaned up the mess and got the toilets suitable for the workers, right? And he took no offense to the attitude or anything that the worker. For him, it was actually just that they deserved a clean and respectable place to take care of business, when they needed to. And that's just another example of if you really believe that your people are your most valuable asset, your most valuable resource, then treat them as such, hear them, and help them, and do some stuff back. Don't just expect
Right?
stuff to be done for you.
Yeah. Like serve them. Like he's like that's amazing. That's an amazing. That's another.
And that's a key word in safety is servant,
Mhm.
right? If you look at our political world right now, uh, the term public servant is completely and totally a lie, because these people are serving their own self-interest in almost all cases, and that's pretty harsh. But an attitude of servanthood and being a public servant would be to say that you're sacrificing yourself to do what's best for the people around you, right? And so it's a place in my personal opinion, we need to return to. So
Well, and hopefully we are going to, hopefully the pendulum's going to swing back because I can't help but agree with you. But they aren't serving the people. I look in my small town in Ontario and the homeless issues that we have here. And I know we've talked a little bit about this in the past, but over the last 15 years have gone through the roof to the point where, there's tents all over the city. And it's
yeah,
not, and the problem is, of course, people make choices of their own. I do believe that. But at the same time, some people don't have very many choices. And sometimes choices are made for you through different programs, like, being given opioids without needing them and then getting addicted. And, like there's all sorts of things that have happened that are not serving people and they're serving people's pockets. You know,
yeah,
it's
it's precisely it's also giving them a ticket to a city where there's better access to opioids and stuff, right? And then so that homeless situation could just migrate to a different location, right?
yeah,
And so it's again, so it's prolific throughout our society. Is the loss of the idea of serving people or being a servant, which is not negative. There's nothing negative about being a servant, right? Um, because it just means that you're putting your other people ahead of yourself in certain circumstances and stuff like that, and that's a really good place to be, especially if you're a safety person. And but it also lends itself to this ideology that we've moved to this I know what's best, right?
yeah.
And we don't necessarily know what's best, and so it's incredibly unrealistic for me to well, for example, had I never worked in the pipeline or anything, and I walked right at a seminary, and my only intent was to preach at people, right? It would be very, very poorly received, and nobody would have any interest in that whatsoever. But if I actually didn't preach at people at all, and took all my pipelining experience and my oil and gas industry experience and stuff that had accumulated over the course of the years that I had been alive, and then I kind of meshed it together with this ideology that people need to be loved and cared for, and you should operate out of an attitude of servanthood. Hey, maybe it would win, right? And for me, on a very personal level, it was a win, and I feel proud of a lot that was accomplished over the course of my career. And of course, now I didn't want to retire at the time that I retired. I wasn't really ready for it, but with all the circumstances that were in play with COVID and stuff, it was one that I made a choice that I promised myself I would have no regrets. And I've had to combat feelings of regret, but at the
Hmm.
same time, watching it change to and I'm probably treading on really thin ice right now, but the safety industry has become a cottage industry all unto itself. And it's very myopic in some cases. I just through observation where it's safety has tremendous power and tremendous influence, and this mantra, this ideology that we know what's best for you, and you always need to be told, is has created kind of a little bit of I'm going to say a bit of a beast, right?
Can
And
you expand on that? So would you say my feeling about that and hearing you say it just right off the cuff is that when you tell people every step they have to take, then you stop letting them make decisions to take the right steps. And so they don't learn to take the right steps when you're not looking.
like an example I would give of that kind of thing is you see places that actually leave the hazard assessment, the task hazard assessment process and stuff up to people that, in point of fact, aren't even on location, right?
Yes.
And so they're given the scope of work, and then they produce a hazard assessment, right? And this hazard assessment, in just personal experience, I've seen them uh, be small novels, right? And they go to the crews, and then the crews read those, and they're told what the hazards are, and they're told what the risks are, and they're given ideologies around mitigating them and stuff, when in point of fact, a lot of them aren't practical, aren't reasonable, aren't really even relevant to the task at hand, right? But it's we know better than you, and
Yes.
uh, so you've got this tremendous power and this tremendous influence and stuff. But there will come a day, in my personal belief, that there will be something cataclysmic happen. Like hopefully not a North Sea or uh, a, a huge disaster or something, but there will be something big enough come along where they'll actually look and they'll say, wow, we actually took liability completely on ourselves, removed it all from the worker and personal responsibility and stuff like that. And we gave them bad information and it cost lives, right? It had a real bad outcome and a bad impact on people and stuff. But again, to empower people and give them the ability is an amazing thing. And like, I'll tell you another story. I remember watching a small crew one day. They were insulators. They were working at grade, so heights weren't involved. And they were just working away. I walked up and I was watching them, and I had a couple of questions for them. So I asked the questions, and then I said, "Can I see your task hazard assessment?" So they handed it to me, and I looked at it, and it was working at heights, uh, slips, trips, and falls. And I mean, this was perfectly level ground. It was nice gravel pad. There was not really any tripping hazards and stuff, but we have to put that down, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like driving to site. We put that in the task hazards assessment. Amazingly enough, we happen to be there already, right? So it's just fodder that's put in. But I thought this was a rather strange assessment. So I looked at the guys, and I there was nothing about cuts. There was nothing about particulate matter, anything like that on this hazard assessment. So I said to the 1 year guy, I said, "Hey, could you get cut?" Oh yeah, we could get cut. We've got the steel banding, and then we've got the cladding, and then we've got the knives that we cut the insulation with. Oh yeah, we could get cut. I said, so would that be one of the hazards that should be on here? And he goes, well, I guess, yeah, that would be a good hazard for on this. And I said, so flying debris, what flying debris is that particulate matter? And he goes, well, I don't know. I said, well, do you have some particulate matter? Yeah, we do. And so then he said to me, well, we actually just copied the hazard assessment that the hydrovac crew had, right?
Of
And
course he did.
yeah, I'm like, okay, cool. I get that. I understand
Blind
that.
with
And
something, you know?
yeah, and
Yeah.
stuff. So, but when I was done explaining it to him, this young man looks back at me and he says, so a hazard assessment is really just about writing down what might bite me in the arse and then how not to get bit. And I'm like, see, now you've educated me on what a hazard assessment really honestly is, right?
Yes.
And those guys did some great hazard assessments. They had some fun with it, and we would they would be ready for me to come to see what they'd put in there to catch me, to make me smile or something over the course of the coming weeks. And I honestly believe if you want to take management and the field worker and get them on the same page and get them working together on stuff like that, those are, I'd almost call them bonding opportunities, right? Where you just you want to mesh with your people and stuff. And I think even when you and I worked together, I remember I had a crazy budget for popsicles and ice cream and stuff like that, and a litany of coolers and stuff. And it was really about getting the supervisors and the safety people just to go out on that hot day and stuff and have a good dialogue with the guys and build a relationship as opposed to be out there to tell them what you saw that they weren't doing right. So,
Yes. There was a lot of ice cream and popsicles going out to the cruise. I remember that.
yeah,
the, the way
Oh,
it
I didn't
started.
get this boyish figure from never having a ice cream cone, right? No.
That's they're a treat. They're a treat. I have to keep on telling my wife to stop buying it. It's just it dis. She says it goes so fast. I know. I
Yeah.
know. Um, so we're coming close here, but I'd like to ask you, I always ask my guests, do you have 3 to 5 rules that you would hope that your children would follow after they move?
Well, I mean, and of course, I'm going to go straight to God's word for that. And the first and foremost, and for my son, especially being a commercial airline pilot and stuff like that, is all I want him to do is to love the Lord, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, and all your soul, right? And so to have that healthy relationship with God, it's a foundational belief thing. I guess you can put that somewhere else if that's what floats your boat and stuff. But for me, that's the one. The second one, of course, is the second greatest command that Christ gave, which is to love your neighbor as yourself, right? And so, who's your neighbor? Well, your neighbor is anybody that you actually encounter in your life, right? It's not just the person across the street and stuff, but it's every coworker that you have, everybody that's out there. And so, can you pour into their lives? Can you love them? And can you give expecting nothing in return, really, to other people, right? And that's not a financial thing like you're running around giving out $10 bills or something. That's about actually giving of yourself uh, for the sake of others, right? So that would be the top 2 rules there. And then the third one for me, which has always been a struggle in my life, would be to love yourself, right? And so which then that takes me on the path of forgiveness, right? Because we have a lot of healthier life if we can, first of all, uh, forgive family members and the people that we love, and then forgive our coworkers and the people that are close to us that can cause us struggles and difficulty in our life. And then lastly, and probably most important at the end of the day, is can we forgive ourselves for when we come up short of the mark, right?
Amazing.
And so those are life rules and the basic principles that I think are key to the battlefield that we call our mind, right? Uh, and it is a battlefield because each and every day there are all these struggles and stuff in our inner person and in our inner being, and how we want to do life and how we want to portray ourselves or who we feel we ought to be and stuff like that. And there's some fundamental guidelines, like, and maybe there will be somebody listening to this that'll be remember, you know gee, Don could say some pretty tough stuff, like he could be pretty harsh and stuff. And but and I can think of a couple people in particular that would say to me, how can you be so decisive? Like, how can you just decide something and be fearless about it? Which is a skill set that is vanished with people's willingness to actually make a decision, make a firm stand, not need something in writing to evidence that, you know, if it's bad, it's bad, right? It's so important. And so I've said to them, uh, even if you're not looking at it from quote unquote a Christian perspective or anything else, there's good historical documentation that evidenced the incredible wisdom of an individual by the name of Solomon. And if you go to where it's documented, which would be the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
in Proverbs, you would have 31 chapters there, which means you have enough chapters to fill the longest months of the year. And there's a few months you might have to read an extra, do 2 in one day. But if you actually go to Proverbs and immerse yourself in Proverbs, it's just about doing life,
Yes.
right? There's no religiosity in it. There's just some very fundamental standard rules. Now, some of them are horrifically horrifying to our culture in this day and age. To think that by sparing any kind of punishment or consequence, you actually do damage your children and stuff. But to be quite frank and honest with you, uh, as I've watched HSE and stuff like that, and this willingness to take all responsibility, all accountability, away from the worker and heap it all onto the management and the company and stuff like that, and make it so that, quote unquote, it's us that have to get them through the day safely, as opposed to a joint effort, is very detrimental, and
Well, it speaks
doesn't.
to how our society is. It speaks
Yeah.
to, like, I mean, number obviously you know where I stand. I surrendered a couple of years ago, and Don, before that, I would have been the one in the camp saying, "You are so decisive. How do you do that? How can you possibly be that sure that you're right?" Um, and it's not about being right. It's about following the word, and the word is right. And once you understand the word is right, it's pretty simple to just say it. And obviously some days it's easier than others. We all have challenges, right? But even in HSE, outside of health and safety, you get into the world and you look at what's happened because we haven't disciplined our children. You look at what's happened. We've given everybody nobody wants to follow any rules. My 18-year-old son, my son Daniel, he came out to me. He was out of his last month, but about a year ago he called and he was talking to me, and we had been talking about the Bible, and that I was following these rules, and this is how I was living my life. And he started reading a little bit of the Bible, and he started listening to some people that were reading the Bible. And he said, it just seems like when you follow those rules, you just don't let bad things happen. I said, well, bad things can
Well,
still happen, but they're the right rules.
yeah, I think it's really true. Like I can remember one of my assignments in a position that I was in and stuff, that after they had conducted a survey to see how things were going, it was found that diversity and inclusion was a big shortfall, right? But interestingly enough, my team actually had spiked. We went up a lot, right? And I won't even refer to the point number and stuff because I don't want to give any evidence to the. But we had done really well at diversity and inclusiveness. And to be quite frank and honest with you, last thing on my mind, right?
Yeah.
I, I, I couldn't care less about diversity or inclusiveness as it is in today's mantra and stuff. But on my team, the expectation was that we would love and respect and care for one another, right? That there were no snotograms or nasty text messages or emails that were deemed acceptable. We were all people functioning in the same office. We had the opportunity to interface almost on a weekly basis, or for a lot of us daily, and some of us it would be every 3 weeks. But all the expectation was is that you respected and you cared for one another, right? On the fundamental principle that we were all people trying to do life and be better at it. Now, did I give those kind of lectures? No, I didn't. I did my best to live that, to love my team and care about them, right? So did we do great on diversity and inclusiveness? Well, yeah, because we didn't find our differences. We didn't focus on how we were different in any way, shape, or form. What we focused on was the common thing. We're people. We're trying to make a living. We're trying to influence the people around us for their benefit and stuff, and it worked, right? And it worked for me. Was it embraced? No, it wasn't embraced, because culturally right now it's all about diversity. We need to be focused on what makes us all, but we're not different.
No.
We're not different, and I guess another thing I'd say to that is, well, I'll ask you a question. You haven't answered any questions for me.
Yeah.
I don't know if am I allowed to ask questions? Oh, what does goal zero mean to you, or beyond zero, or?
I have mixed feelings about goal zero. And I guess a lot of it is because there were so many years where we were trying to shoot for zero, and we were talking about shooting for zero. And there's so many ways to, and I don't want to say this the wrong way, but there's so many ways to cook the books. So we're not going to report this, or we're going to have good case management, or we're going to have good, different ways to make sure that that doesn't count for us. And so we look at to me, it's the objective should be to get everybody home safe, and it should be a daily conversation about how to get your job done safe. And I feel like the messaging with Goal Zero, well, I think initially was okay, the right idea. I think obviously we don't want people getting hurt. We don't want zero, we want zero incidents. But shooting for nothing's hard to hit.
Right. And you don't win very many games if you've got a zero.
That's right. That's right.
Right. Like there are no games out there that I know of. I mean, maybe there's something out there where your hope is that you have nothing in the net when it's done, but it's pretty hard to do that, right? Something has to end up in a net or in an end zone or something like that in order to evidence productivity. And so, it was. I remember having a conversation with a leader at one point in time, and we both showed our disapproval for the ideology of quote unquote goal zero or however you want to word it. There's a bunch of different ways of saying zero, right? Is our target. But in our discussion, beyond zero is what came up, is what was beyond zero. And the beyond zero concept taught me a lot about the inability of our people and our leadership now in this day and age to own something, right? Because it was pretty simple. It was a catchy phrase, beyond zero. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's cool. What's beyond zero, right? And for me, it was instantaneous. I knew exactly what beyond zero was, and it was, well, build a program for it. And it's like it shouldn't be a program, right? There shouldn't be a program for beyond zero. Beyond zero is simple for me, right? I want not only for the people to go home safe, and they always say that, go home with all your fingers, go to work and go home the same way you came.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that expression 1,000 times, right? So, but my thing on Beyond Zero was to say, hey man, not only are you going to come to work today, but when you're done work today, you're actually going to go home richer, right? Because you made a good day's pay. You, in all likelihood, you're going to learn something. And, working for some of these companies and I'm very, very proud to work for Shell. Some remarkable opportunities and some remarkable feats that were completed by the company and stuff. And I mean, there's ups and downs with everything, right? But if you worked at Shell on a Shell project, most of the projects we did had state-of-the-art gym equipment
Mm-hmm.
and stuff, like just amazing facilities, right? So wow, you could actually go home healthier, right? I mean, we had advanced to the place where Shell went completely and totally over the top for menus, right? So that you could actually have and eat whatever. It wasn't about going up and eating what was put in front of you. It was actually about going up in the camp and having a selection that provided everybody's to meet their needs. So it could be bodybuilders, or people that were just building a big body, right? It didn't make any difference. But so even from a perspective of happiness, just amazing state of the art facilities, whether it was the golf simulators or whatever. So Beyond Zero was going to work, making good money, getting more fit, or watching the best TV channels you could possibly want, or playing in the golf simulator, eating all these great foods. I mean, they catered extremely well to the worker, right? And maybe even too well in some ways, right? That people lost the kind of that gratitude for the amazing effort that was put by. But that was, and I'll just speak to Shell. That was Shell's way of saying that you mattered, right?
Yeah. And
Now,
if I could
did
say,
we always?
when I first
Hmm?
when I was first at a camp role, my first stint out, I was like, I wonder what it's going to be like out there. People respected each other. People were good to each other, and not because they had to be like, it was for the majority of the time. There you could go work out. Every place I went to had a gym. I was after the rough years of camp, right? You just don't understand how much they actually gave us by giving us those resources. The gym, the diet, the even the dry camp was a benefit for a whole bunch of people, right? Like
Yeah.
those resources, it was enriching. It really was. It
Yeah.
wasn't hard to go to
And,
work.
and so that made going beyond just being safe for the day was a really easy thing. I mean, the company actually spent tremendous resources to ensure that the capacity was go beyond. But what amazed me was leadership's, you know, just the personal ownership of that. Like, what is it? What does it mean to you? And say, well, tell me. And it's like, no, actually own it.
Yeah.
And take it to your people and show to them that you own it, right? And that it's an amazing thing, an amazing opportunity and stuff. And that's I go back to what I said very, very early in this discussion is the companies do believe it, right? It's the people that struggle. Uh, the companies themselves, they provide tremendous resources and almost over the top. I'm going to retract that. Not even almost over the top. In many cases, completely over the top. Like that tremendous amount of expenditure and care given and thought consideration to what the needs of the people are in this day and age. And when I'm saying that, I wasn't spared the early day camps, right? I shared rooms with 4 guys and stuff in
You can
little
only
tiny
imagine the
camps. And
scenes.
no interest in reliving a lot of that. Seeing a bug like Norwalk come into your camp and absolutely every single person being just devastated by it and stuff, right? Like because of hygiene and stuff. Whereas, having your own bathrooms, your own showers, like, oh my gosh, I had to share. I had a Jack and Jill. Like, seriously?
Get
I
over it.
mean, yeah. It was nothing like that in the day. And so we're getting a little off topic, but that all plays into my idea that people are important. And but we've got to own that on an individual level now. I think a lot of companies show it, do the best they can with it, but it's then your people. How do you get your people to really start to demonstrate that the servant attitude, right? That they take an approach of loving and caring for the worker, which can be hard love. And you know me well enough to know, my team at the time that you reported to me and stuff like that. You also know that I would travel all over the place dealing with other issues. So I was often not there.
Mm-hmm.
And people would say, well, how can you trust your team to make the right decisions? And I said, they know exactly. They know when they need to call me and what they need to tell me. And they know what I trust them with and stuff. And they know what the consequences are for failure, right? Like, because it's not a happy conversation. It's not a good conversation because I don't like to be let down and I don't want to let them down, right? And of that, like I'm incredibly humbled by your contacting me and reconnecting with me and stuff. But I can also tell you that I'll be at a wedding next Friday of another person that you work directly with. Uh, that got a hold of me because his son is being married, and no idea how humbling uh, and how honored I feel that that person would reach out this many years later and say, "Hey, would you be there? Because you've impacted my life." And if that's my whole legacy, Dan, I'm thrilled with it. Did I write any books? No. Did I star in anything? Well, I shouldn't say. But I might write a book still. I don't know. But
If
at
you,
this point in time, I haven't done any of that.
yeah.
But there are lives that I've touched, and my life has been touched, like by a lot of you guys. I'm very, very, very deeply touched by it. So
Well,
continues to be.
that's why I called, and that's why I reached out. And it's I have a good friend who says every once in a while he has a day where he feels like he's a paper bag full of diamonds because he's got things to give people. And I just feel like you're the same kind of guy, and you've spent your life giving people a lot of faith just through example, and a lot of understanding, and clearly your heart's in the right place, Don. So thank you so much for joining me today. It was wonderful catching up with you.
Well, thanks again. I appreciated it. I hope there's value in some of what I shared. So,
There definitely is. There definitely is.
okay.
All right.
God bless.